Hi, everyone. The metric conversion problems really got lost in the shuffle this week with all of the introductory material. So I want to make a separate video on metric conversions. If you understand the metric prefixes and the metric base units, you can skip this beginning part and just go straight to where I start working the problems, if that's the only part you need. But I encourage you to watch the whole thing if you really need help with everything. So as we discussed in class, in the metric system, we can measure volume, length, and mass or weight using the same exact term every time. So rather than the English system of measurement for volume where we have teaspoons, tablespoons, cups, pints, quarts, gallons, and there's no direct conversion between those, we have to memorize a lot of things. Everything in the metric system is units of 10. It's a 10-based measurement system. For volume, the base units or standard units are always liters. And the abbreviation for that can be a capital L or a lowercase l. And I'm going to make it loopy so it doesn't look like a 1. If you do it like this, it obviously looks more like a 1. Length is always meters, which is an M. And mass or weight is always grams, which is a G. To make this bigger or smaller, we use a prefix, and that prefix means the same thing whether we're talking about liters, meters, or grams. It means the same thing every time. So we wouldn't say we have 1,000 grams. We would say we have a kilogram. We wouldn't say we have 1/100th of a meter. We would say we have a centimeter. So let's quickly talk about those metric prefixes. Again, if you don't need this part, skip it and go to the calculations. I'm going to draw sort of a number line. So if these were my base units, or my standard units. Okay, meaning 1 liter, 1 gram, or 1 meter. To make the base units bigger, the only one you need to know is kilo, abbreviated with the letter K. And it's 1,000 times bigger than the base units. Okay, so it would equal 1 kiloliter is going to equal 1,000 liters. 1 kilogram equals 1,000 grams. And 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters. So that's the only one for this class that you need to know for getting bigger. There are obviously more. If you look at the lab exercise, there's a whole complete chart of all of those metric prefixes. For getting smaller than the base units, we're going to use different prefixes. So getting smaller, and then we're going to get smaller and then smaller again. The first one is going to be centi, abbreviated with the letter C. And centi is 1/100th of the base units. And remember, we talked about there are 2 ways you can express this, and I'm going to use both ways. First, though, on this chart, I'm going to just use the 1/100th. So 1 centiliter is 1/100th of a liter. 1 centigram is 1/100th of a gram. And 1 centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. So again, means the same thing regardless of what we're talking about. The other way, though, that we could express that is if a centimeter is 1/100th of a meter, it means it takes 100 centimeters to make the whole. Okay, so I don't have a meter stick, I just have this small metric ruler. But if this was an entire meter, each one of these is a centimeter. So this number 1 here, that's 1 centimeter. And it takes 100 of those to make the whole meter. So each one is 1/100th of the whole. That means it takes 100 of those to make the whole. Those are saying the same thing. So we could also say that rather than saying 1 centimeter is 1/100th of a meter, we could also say 100 centimeters equals 1 meter. That's saying the same thing. And that's important when you start doing your calculations because sometimes it's going to be easier to use the whole numbers instead of the decimal. One of these will make more sense to your brain than the other one. Go with whichever one you can more easily remember. Some people, it's easier to remember that the centimeter is a fraction of the whole. For some, it's easier to remember that it takes 100 of the little ones to equal the big one. Okay, milli is the next one. And that's an M. And that's 1/1000th. So it takes 1,000 of the millis to equal the whole. So here we go. 1 milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter. Kind of running out of room here. The other way we could say that is it takes 1,000 milliliters to equal 1 liter. Those are saying the same thing. So in other words, it takes 1,000 of the small ones to equal the whole. So each of the small ones is 1/1000th of the bigger one. And then the same thing would go for meters and for grams. I'll just write that down here. So if 1 milliliter equals 1/1000th of a liter, 1 milligram is 1/1000th of a gram, and 1 millimeter is 1/1000th of a meter. Okay, and again, we could also say it takes 1,000 millimeters to equal 1 meter. It takes 1,000 milligrams to equal 1 gram. Those are saying the same thing. And then finally, the last one you need to know is micro. Micro is 1/1,000,000th. And so that would be way over here, micro. It's 1/1,000,000th. It's abbreviated with the mu symbol. It's going to be 5 zeros and the 1. And again, I'm going to write that somewhere else, but I really should have moved kilo over to the right a little bit more now that I'm looking at this. But I just wanted you to see this number line of getting smaller and then getting smaller and then getting smaller. And here we're getting bigger. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense with this messy drawing. But let me write micro down here. Okay, so micro is 1/1,000,000th. So 5 zeros after the decimal. What that means is 1 microliter is 1/1,000,000th of a liter. Another way to say that is it takes 1,000,000 microliters to equal 1 liter. That's very small. If we were in person for lab, you would be using a micropipette, which incidentally is part of the basic measurement techniques part of the lab this week. And when you look at that micropipette, imagine that that little tip holds millionths of a liter. That's very small. When you get into microbiology, if you go on to take it, or if you take anatomy or physiology, a lot of things you look at under the microscope. You're going to measure the size of those cells or cell organelles in micrometers, 1/1,000,000th of a meter. Those are very, very small. So it takes 1,000,000 micrometers to equal 1 meter. It takes 1,000,000 micrograms to equal 1 gram. And again, the other way we could say that is we could say that 1 micrometer is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. I always have to count the zeros to make sure I did it right. And 1 microgram is 1/1,000,000th of a gram. Those are saying the same thing. We're going to now use these conversions, turn them into fractions, and use that as a method for converting from one unit of measurement to another. Okay, so if you've skipped ahead, this is where you want to start working the problems. I'm going to give you a bunch of sample problems. Well, not a bunch. I'm going to give you several practice problems to use as examples when you are working the problems. You know, in math, it's all about seeing the pattern. The more you do it, the more likely you are to see the pattern. Once the light goes on and you see the pattern, then you're just going to follow that same pattern for every single problem. And it just takes a lot of practice. These kinds of things take practice. You weren't born knowing this. Don't feel bad if it takes you some considerable amount of time to figure this out. I know that there's anxiety about math in general. You can do this, and I'm here to help you. So if you're still struggling after you get through these sample problems on the video, I'm going to post some additional sample problems, but please come see me in my office hours and let's work as many problems together as you need until you start seeing that pattern. These are very important to understand. So my first problem that I'm going to work for you, how many milligrams are in 22 grams? Okay, another way we could word this problem, incidentally, is we could just say something like convert 22 grams. Sorry. Okay, why is my eraser suddenly not working? Sorry about that. Convert 22 grams to milligrams would be another way of saying that. So you always start with what you're given. In this case, it's 22 grams. And I want to convert it to milligrams. And I'm going to do that by multiplying by a fraction of equivalent numbers. What are my equivalent numbers? I'm always going to write those down so I make sure I don't make a mistake. Okay, so I know by looking at my milli, I can either use this one, okay, or I can use this one. And I'm going to make that into a fraction. I personally like whole numbers, but I am going to work it both ways for you so you can see that you come up with the same solution. Okay, so I can either say there are 1,000 milligrams in 1 gram, or I can say 1 milligram is 1/1000th of a gram. Those are saying the same thing. I'm going to use this one first. Okay, so I need to turn this into a fraction. One of these numbers is going to go on top and one's going to go on the bottom. The way I determine which one goes on top and which one goes on bottom, I'm trying to cancel out grams. So that means I need to divide by grams. So no matter what, my grams need to go on top, which means my milligrams go on. I'm sorry, did I just say my grams need to go on top? I should have said grams go on the bottom, right where I've written it. So grams have to go on bottom. So when you divide grams by grams, they cancel out. Now I just need to fill in my numbers, and these numbers don't change. Okay, it has to be 1,000 milligrams equals 1 gram. So 1,000 milligrams, 1 gram. Now if I divide grams by grams, they cancel out. I'm in milligrams, and this question says how many milligrams. So my answer is going to be in milligrams. You always have to include your units in the problem and in the answer, and you must set it up this way to get credit. On the exam, on the lab exam, if you don't show your work this way, you will not get credit, even if you got the right answer. Now I just do the math, and remember, you multiply by what's on top and you divide by what's on bottom. So it's going to be 22 times 1,000 divided by 1. I can skip the divided by 1 step because that gives me the same solution. So it's 22 times 1,000, which gives me 22,000 milligrams. So there are 22,000 milligrams in 22 grams. Those are the same thing. So converting 22 grams to milligrams, 22,000 milligrams in 22 grams. If I decided to use this equation instead, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with my 22 grams. I'm going to make a fraction. My grams have to be on bottom and milligrams on top. Why? Because I want to cancel out grams, and if I divide grams by grams, they cancel out. 1 milligram on top, 1,000th of a gram on the bottom. And if I divide 22 by 0.001, I get 22,000, and it's milligrams. So that's a very basic one-step conversion. You need to always write down your equivalency, make it into a fraction, decide which way to flip the fraction. which number is going to go on top in your numerator and which one's going to be on the bottom in your denominator. Okay, let's do another one. How many meters are in 7.4 kilometers? Again, we're going to start with what we're given, 7.4 kilometers. I'm going to multiply by a fraction that converts kilometers to meters. And I can go back to my kilos here. And here's my kilometers. 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters. So I'm going to write that down here. Oops. Okay, so 1 kilometer equals 1,000 meters. This becomes my fraction. I just need to decide which way to flip it. And I need to decide, does the 1,000 meters go on the top or the bottom? Does the 1 kilometer go on the top or the bottom? In this case, I want to cancel out kilometers. So my kilometers need to go on the bottom and my meters need to go on the top. Now I just fill in my numbers. 1 kilometer, 1,000 meters. And I multiply 7.4 times 1,000. And again, technically it's divided by 1, but you don't need to do that step. But most importantly, my kilometers cancel out and I'm in meters. And my question says, how many meters? So I'm already at the solution with just one step. Okay, so 7.4 times 1,000 is going to be 7,400 meters. Okay, that's a pretty basic one, just one step. Again, the trick is write down your equivalency, make it into a fraction. And if you need to work it out, you can use your cell phone calculator. And if it's just a one-step problem, it shouldn't be that difficult. Sorry, my calculator's right here. 1 second. And I just want to show you that on your calculator, if it's a multi-step problem, you don't have to go through multiple steps. So I would just, on this one, it's just one step. So I'm just going to go 7.4 times 1,000. And that gives me 7,400. But again, you can do that in your head, that part. Okay, now we're going to get to one where we need more than one step to complete the problem. And this is where it gets a little bit trickier for some students. Okay. If 1 quart equals 0.95 liters, so it's almost a full liter. How many quarts are in 2,000 milliliters? Okay, first question. How do I know this is a multi-step problem? The reason I know this is a multi-step problem is because the equation that I'm given for equivalency here, 1 quart equals 0.95 liters. I want to convert to quarts, but my conversion factor is between quarts and liters, and I'm starting with milliliters. In order to use this piece of information, I need to first get from milliliters to liters. Okay, so I need to convert from milliliters to liters. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that because I know there are 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter. So I can turn this into a fraction and I can use that to convert from milliliters to liters first. So I'm going to start with what I'm given, 2,000 milliliters. And to convert to liters, I'm going to use this as my fraction. What do I want to put on the bottom? I want to put on the bottom whatever I'm trying to cancel out. In this case, I'm trying to cancel out milliliters. So my milliliters have to go on the bottom, which means my liters have to go on the top. Milliliters divided by milliliters will cancel out milliliters. Now I just put in my numbers. 1,000 milliliters equals 1 liter. So that means I'm going to divide by 1,000. But I don't do that yet. I'm going to set up my next parentheses right next to this one. And now I'm going to use this equivalency. I'm now going to go from liters to quarts because now I'm in liters. Okay, now I can go from liters to quarts. I want how many quarts? So if I'm trying to cancel out liters, my liters need to go on the bottom and my quarts need to go on the top. Liters divided by liters cancels out, and now I'm in quarts, and this says how many quarts. Okay, now I'm in the right units. I just have to write in my numbers. 1 quart, sorry, oh my gosh, 0.95 liters. So in this case, it's going to be 2,000 divided by 1,000 divided by 0.95. I don't hit equal in between. The way I'm going to punch this into my calculator, again, it's technically 2,000 times 1 divided by 1,000 times 1 divided by 0.95, but you don't need to do the times 1 because you end up with the same answer. So the way I put this in my calculator is going to be 2,000 divided by 1,000 divided by 0.95 equals, it comes out of my calculator to be 2.105. I could round this to 2.10 or just 2.1. But either way, you want to include the units. So I'm going to say it's 2.1 quarts. Again, the way I knew it was multi-step is because this first conversion factor I've been given uses different units than what I'm starting with. So now I need to think, okay, I'm starting with milliliters. How can I use this conversion factor? Oh, I can convert milliliters to liters, and then I could use it. Okay, I wouldn't want to try to convert milliliters to quarts. I would try to convert metric to metric, okay, and then I can use that piece of information. I'll work one more for you. I'm just going to make this one up. And this is very similar to one that's in the problem set. Okay, so if 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters, how many inches are in 12 meters? This is another example of a two-step problem. How do I know that? Because I'm starting with meters, but my conversion factor to inches uses centimeters. So I need to somehow get from meters to centimeters first. How do I do that? I do that by knowing that there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. Okay, I could also know that, oops, sorry. I don't like that on the side. I could also do that by knowing that 1 centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. Again, you could use either one of those. I'm going to use whole numbers for this one. So I'm going to start with my 12 meters and I'm going to convert to centimeters so that I can use this one next. Okay. I want my meters on the bottom. So this becomes my fraction. Which way do I flip it? Well, I want meters on bottom. So meters cancel out. Centimeters on top. So that means it's going to be 100 centimeters over 1 meter. Now I'm in centimeters. So now I can go centimeters to inches. And I'm going to make this into a fraction. What do I want on the bottom? I'm trying to get rid of centimeters. So centimeters have to go on the bottom and inches go on top. Centimeters cancel out. Sorry, this is hard to see now that I've been drawing on it. This is 100 right here. My 1 inch goes here, 2.54 centimeters. Okay, again, it's okay to put a number on the bottom. It doesn't always have to be 1. Sometimes you're going to have a number that's not 1. This says how many inches, and now I'm in inches. So now unit-wise, I know I'm there. So now I just need to do the math. And again, the way I'm going to put this into my calculator is I'm just going to go straight across. I'm not going to solve in between. So I'm going to say 12 times 100. I don't need to divide by 1 or multiply by 1. So it's going to be 12 times 100 divided by 2.54. And I'm going to punch that in all at once. 12 times 100 divided by 2.54 equals 472.44, and my units are inches. So I hope that helps. Please do not hesitate to come to my office hours if you have additional questions, but I encourage you to try to work through as many problems as possible so you start to, and the more you work through, the easier it will be. But again, you weren't born knowing how to do this. Please don't be frustrated or discouraged if you don't get it the first few times. Please come see me. We'll work through some problems together, and then I encourage you to work as many of the practice problems as possible. I will also post the key, okay, but I encourage you, work the problem first and then look at the key only to see if you got it right. Don't use the key to study because you won't learn as well that way. Okay, thanks.